Guten Erev Shabbos, everybody. Ephraim Schwartz calling you here from the Holy Land, from my office, which has been cleaned up. Take a look at this desk. Have you ever seen this desk this clean before? I know some of you are saying, well, that's messy. You've got an empty plate on it, but it is kicky. By the way, check me out. Yeah. Baruch Hashem, getting skinnier. And it is Erev Shabbos, and we are here in my office, sitting down, and going to talk to you about something, actually, a chapter that I wrote in my book, the most enjoyable book you've ever read about Pesach, which, of course, you could still get. And it's great for these parshas that are talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And I wanted to share with you it's one of my favorite chapters in my book, because I think it's a great question, and it's a whole new world view that I think a lot of people miss. And the answer, it's one of those questions that I don't have an answer to, that bothered me. But perhaps even in the non-answer, I think there's just an incredible message that I think we all need to take from these parshios as well. And the question really is, and the chapter is called The Worst Jew Ever. Okay, so I want you to, in your mind, close your eyes, and I want you to think about, in your brains, who is the worst Jew that you can possibly think of? Is it this anti-religious, I'm not going to say names, of course, that was out to destroy Israel, these BDSers, or these Eretz Yisrael? Is it these hardcore, Neturei Karta, Haredi guys that are a bad name? Are these people that have done these terrible acts to, innocent women or children? Or is it these, some of you are liberals or Democrats are thinking of these horrible Trump people, or these terrible left-wing people, or these... and everybody can think in your mind who that worst, terrible Jew that you can imagine is. And then I want you to have that image in your face and think that the truth of the matter is they're really not that bad in comparison. Because we're told, when we go down to Mitzrayim, that as in the end of this week's Parsha, Hashem realizes that He has to save us. Right? We're supposed to be going there for 400 years, but Hashem has to intensify the slavery and the punishment that we have over there, because He realizes that we are reaching the 49th level of Tumah, right? The lowest of the low, the worst of the worst. And if we stay there for 1 minute more, game's over. We can never be redeemed. We're beyond any type of redemption. So the Jews in Mitzrayim are much worse than anybody that we know or that we can think about today, right? That much I think we agreed to, because even the ones that are today, they're not on the 49th level of impurity. They haven't reached that lowest point yet. Now, okay, maybe they're not as bad as that, because the Jews there must have been really terrible. But then let's think about what the Jews back there in Mitzrayim looked like for a second. Well, one thing we're told is that they were saved in the merit, the shloshinu es shemam, es malbusham, es lashonam, that they did not change their names, their language, and their dress, right? So seemingly, the guy's name over there in Mitzrayim was Yankel, Beryl, right? Some type of nice Yiddish name, right? Moishela, right, perhaps, right? He dressed certainly in a black hat or a shtreimel, right? Or he looked like a totally white shirt for sure, right? Definitely tzitzis hanging out, payas, right, for sure, right? He spoke Lashon HaKodesh, right? Or Yiddish, I'm sure, was also considered Lashon HaKodesh. Or if you're Sephardi, Ladino, he knew his traditional language, and that was what he spoke, because he understood that this is the worst Jew ever. Okay, the 49th level of Tumah, right? Besides that worst Jew ever that we now have to change our image about, what he looks like, right? But we're told that he was somebody that never engaged in any licentious relationships while he was assimilated in Mitzrayim for 200 years, right? He wasn't scrolling on things that he should not have been. He had filtered internet, certainly, right? He was certainly not looking or tempted by any of these Egyptian women or beauty queens or anything. No, that's not him. He's a worst Jew ever, right? We're told that Jews were saved because of the merit of chesed that they did for one another. That each Jew, no matter what, they would do kindness. They had chesed organizations there in Egypt. And they were the worst Jews ever. 49th level of Tumah. We are told, right, that there were Jews that took blows for one another, right? That the capos who were in charge of the Jews' slavery would go ahead and allow themselves to be beaten rather than forcing other Jews to do work. Worst Jews ever. But I don't understand. If they are dressed nicely and they look great and they are fantastic and they're chesed and they're taking blows for one another and they're not involved in what makes them the worst Jews ever? What got them to that? What does that mean that they're on the 49th level of Tumah? That if they would stay there for one more second, they can't be redeemed. How bad are they? But realize they are worse than anybody you have in your mind. And it's a question that I don't have an answer to. What made them the worst Jews ever? If they were on this, what I would say sounds like a very exalted state that we should arrive to. So there's no answer to that question. But there's an incredible message. I think there's two messages that we have from that question. And the first message, I think, from these, almost contradictory chazals. And the first message and the answer is that whoever we had in our mind that we think is the worst Jew ever, guess what? He's not. I come from much, much worse. We were much, much worse when we were in Egypt than whoever the worst person we think is today. We were in a much lower situation. We were in the 49th, so he is not nearly as bad as that must be. And I need to go ahead and be humbled, right, when I think about somebody else, because I come from much worse. I come from the 49th level of Tumah. That's my background, right? You know how there are, Baruch Hashem, so many Balei Tshuva today. And a Baal Tshuva would never really, one of the interesting things about Balei Tshuva is that they sort of, they feel humbled in front of FFBs. Little do they know, right? But they're like, my father was a Machal Shabbos. My mother didn't really have it. They ate who knows what, and that tempers the way that they look at it. They have a certain awe and respect and appreciation of other from Jews. We need to have that towards every single Jew, because we're all coming from people that were on the Memtes Shari Tumah, on the 49th level of Tumah. And that's an incredibly powerful message that I think that should change and reframe our way that we look at other Jews. But I think even more powerful than that is another message which is much deeper, which is that the worst Jew in our mind, think about him, no matter who he is, it could be a she, but I think probably most of you are thinking of he's. We never think of women as the worst Jew ever. It's got to be a guy. Only guys could really do bad things to make them the worst ever, right? But that worst Jew ever that you have in your mind, and if you've got a name on it, that's even better. Guess what? He was redeemed from Egypt. Hashem redeemed much worse than he was from Egypt. He was not beyond redemption. I was not beyond redemption. Hashem saw that worst Jew ever on the 49th level of Tumah, and he says, that's my boy. I'm going to pull him out of this pit. I'm going to perform miracles for him that nobody's ever seen before. I'm going to split the sea for him. In fact, we're told that Hashem says that Dosan and Aviram stayed in Mitzrayim. Right? Those two terrible people that snitched on Moshe, that Moshe gets into a fight, and they stayed in Mitzrayim. And that's why when Paro says, El B'nai Yisrael, that they're running around, right? Paro is talking to Dosan and Aviram. And then how did they get there later? So the Medrash says that they themselves crossed, and Hashem came later. They missed Kriyas Yam, and Hashem split the sea for them again. Because the worst Jews ever, Hashem says, the Dosan and Aviram, you're not beyond redemption. I'm going to save you. I'm going to go ahead and redeem you also, because you're my child and I love you. And I'm never going to let you fall all the way down. And I'm always going to pick you up and take you out. And that is an incredible message. Our tendency in life is to go ahead and to try to, look at other Jews around and sort of put ourselves on a scoreboard. Well, I'm better than him. I'm not as good as him. So I would say I'd rank about in the top 85% or 90% of Klal Yisrael. So I'm good to go. But it's not about a scorecard with us and Hashem. and us and other Jews. We're not in a competition. We're not in a game. It's about that all of us are one family and all of us are precious and none of us are ever the worst Jew ever. And all of us can be redeemed. And that's an incredible way that we have to look at the world, that we're all children of Hashem and that we all can be picked out of Mitzrayim. Each of us have our own personal Egypts that we have to leave and that we all have to get through. And that's the message of Yetzias Mitzrayim. What an incredible message. I had a tour, Baruch Hashem, yesterday. And it was a nice Haredi, good family. And I took them to a Hesder Yeshiva in Alon Shavut over there. It's the first time they were in a Hesder Yeshiva. And you walk in a base medrash there, and there's almost this thing that I would say, the way that I was raised, Haredi world, is we have a monopoly on Torah. Unless you have a black hat and white shirt and you're sitting there in the mirror, you're learning a brisket, and they walk in there in shock to see boys, leather yarmulkes, with smartphones, with girlfriends even. But they're learning Torah. And they're special, and they're holy. And it's a different world, but it gives them a whole appreciation that every Jew has a connection to Torah, no matter where they are. And I would tell you more than that. We can go out to the beaches and to the Chilon, and people are not religious, and they also have their own. Lo shinu es shemam, es shonim es mabushim. They have madregas where they still have their Jewish name, their Jewish identity, and that's their Egypt, and that's where they're meant to go ahead and go through. And each one of us, when we see that, and we can look at each Jew and appreciate each Jew, then we can come together and we can walk through the Yam Suf together. And we can take each other's hands one by one and walk and cross and say, we're one family from Hashem. An incredible thought, an incredible idea. And I want to wish you guys an incredible Shabbos, a good, exciting, exhilarating Shabbos. Subscribe to my weekly email. And if you didn't subscribe, then just check out my blog. It's a really, really good one this week, an important one on a similar topic. And it's holylandinsights.blogspot.com. But shoot me off an email. It's much easier. Rabbischwartz@yahoo.com. And I'll subscribe you. And you can get this on WhatsApp. And you get my video email and my Parsha email. And if you'd like my book, certainly send me an email. I'll try to arrange it. You can get yourself Rabbi Schwartz's most incredible, most enjoyable book that you'll ever read about Pesach, number 1 and number 2. Have a great Shabbos. Bye.